Fire. Smoke. Families gathering around, heading toward the center of town. When my players arrived to the village of East Haven, they saw all these things, and they were curious. They headed in to where all the villagers were, and there they saw it. A pyre being raised above all else, with a flock of guards preventing any from drawing nearby. But most important of all, resting upon this fire was a man. In the middle of this pyre, a man raised, his face bloodied and beaten, and a mark upon his chest. My players were curious. The bard telepathically messaged the man upon the pyre and asked him what he was doing here. The man did not respond. The captain of the guards shouted out, "This man has committed murder, and for that he must pay." The bard once again asked, "Are you guilty?" The man was silent. As the captain of the guards went to lay the fire down at his feet so that he may burn for his crimes, the bard asked once again, "Did you deserve this?" The man replied, "Yes." He gave them a set of directions to his safe house located on the outskirts of town. The party rushed there and discovered a few interesting clues. Some magical items, but most important of all, a map. A map leading to the middle of the frozen tundra and leading to a place that is a potential font of power. My party rushed there, and when they did, after a day's worth of travel, they found it. In the middle of the frozen tundra, a spire that rises clear above all else. But something was off about this. It didn't look natural. It looked man-made. After investigating around, my players found a hole which they were able to climb down through. And once they did, they found themselves in an otherworldly place. Architecture that is long since ancient, and the entirety of this location flipped on its head. My players spent a decent amount of time exploring the first floor, but the first thing that truly startled them was a pair of spider sharks that emerged from the walls, attempting to rip their flesh asunder and hurl out nasty barbed webs against them. My players fought hard, and thankfully were able to stop this devilish duo of fiends. After climbing down more of the spire's location, my players stumbled across the very man that they saw burn, except something was different. He was clearly alive. This man was a simulacrum, and my players discussed in great length how they had just watched this man die, and the simulacrum, confused, didn't want to believe it, but he knew it to be true. He knew that he was on death's door. He had a timer on him. Him being a simulacrum can only do so much, and he can only take so much punishment. Sooner or later, he will die. The simulacrum began to explain. There is a location located in the spire which can transform illusion into reality. Perhaps that's my ticket to survival. Perhaps you can help me. My players went down to the bottom floor and cleared the place out of any beasties that were crawling around, and they discovered it. A location which can transform fiction into reality, illusions into material. Naturally, my players wanted to discover this magic themselves to see if it would work. So my Eldritch Knight decided it would be a good idea to place a shadow blade upon the altar. When the shadow blade was put down and the magic was hard at work, there they saw it. They saw the shadow blade before them begin to swell and transform and grow immensely in size. There they saw this innocent shadow blade transform into a hideous black ooze which began to pour along the floors, the walls, and the ceilings, attempting to devour anything in its path. This ooze was devastating. It attacked the party, It rendered weapons and armor asunder as it began to crawl forward. My players had to retreat, and there they fought in the hallway, the ooze encapsulating the entirety of the hall. They were fighting from all sides, but eventually they were able to smite the creature. But of course not before some serious damage was sustained. Now, having seen this firsthand, they recognized that there was some problems with the machine. They tried yet again, and this time, the Shadow Blade disappeared. In the blink of an eye, this Shadow Blade was gone, and they naturally assumed the magic in this area was broken. The Simulacrum simply thanked them for testing out this troublesome area and said that he was going to work on this some more. My players decided to leave the area and perhaps come back another day. But they weren't the only ones that left. You see, the Shadow Blade, this condensed darkness that swells with psychic powers, was not actually gone. The Eldritch Knight was able to find this out, in fact. He felt a connection with this Shadow Blade, and when he snapped his fingers to make the weapon return to him, he felt that connection. He knew that his weapon was still on this material plane, and he knew when he snapped his finger, he was summoning the blade. And yet when he snapped his finger, nothing appeared. He saw nothing. Now, he was naturally curious. He tried so many experiments, and yet nothing worked. This continued on for days and days. He was baffled at this. Now, this mighty Eldritch Knight, armed with gauntlets of ogre power which made him swell in strength, didn't notice a thing. But the Paladin had his suspicions. The Paladin attempted to divine all round and see if there was undead lurking nearby. And that's when the Paladin noticed something. There was undead coming from the Eldritch Knight's location. Now they were concerned. There's an undead right there with the Eldritch Knight? How can this be? So they didn't know what to do. Eventually, they decided that perhaps this undead is emanating from where he snaps his fingers. And that is when they decided to take off the gauntlets of ogre power. It is then when the true horror emerged. When the gauntlets of ogre power were stripped off of the Eldritch Knight, his muscly form began to shrink and shrivel. For you see, the Shadow Blade was in reality a shadow itself that was tucked away inside of the gauntlets of ogre strength and was sapping away at the strength of the fighter. He couldn't feel anything. The magical gauntlets were able to sustain his strength, but the second the gauntlets were taken off, his form shrank down to next to nothing. If the shadow had consumed his strength little by little every day, at one point he would have simply died, but he wouldn't have known the cause. Thankfully, my players were able to catch on to this ruse and find this shadowy figure. With the fighter now reduced down to simply 3 strength, he crawled upon the ground and cried, and thankfully the Paladin was able to channel in his divine fury and banish the undead from this mortal plane. This was a harrowing experience for all, and it made the party realize something. If you are given stats from a magical item, make sure that nothing's sapping away at it from behind the scenes. And that's my story on how a Shadow Blade nearly killed its own caster. Thank you all so much for watching. I wanted to try out a different style of storytelling here, so go ahead and tell me if this works. I want to experiment with a few things and figure out what works well for everyone. I have plenty of stories to tell about my amazing players throughout the course of oh so many games that I've DM'd. That is going to do it for me for this video though. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all to my amazing patrons. You guys are absolutely incredible. That is going to do it for me though. Thank you so much for watching, and I cannot wait to see you all in the next one.